She had sewn up more broken bones than she cared to count. She had coaxed fevered children back from the edge by the dim light of a tallow candle, and she knew the shape of grief so well it had become a quiet, constant companion. Still, nothing in all those years of stitching and steadying prepared her for the night the outlaw came to her threshold. Eliza Marlowe kept her little clinic at the edge of Dry Hollow with an orderliness that felt like a prayer. Shelves lined with bottles caught the lamplight, and a brass basin gleamed beneath a clean cloth. Outside, the town breathed slow and suspicious. Doors bolted, dogs already sunk into sleep. Eliza had chosen a life of small mercies in a place that offered few. She measured courage in teaspoons of laudanum and fingertip pulses. The knock came like a gunshot. By the time she opened the door, the moon had sluiced the street with silver. A pair of mounted deputies stood huddled on the boardwalk, their faces cut from the same hard timber as the buildings. Between them, slumped and dragging a dark smear behind him, was Jonah Pike, a name that was a bruise to the town. This was Jonah, who once had laughed like a boy and leaned his whole broad shoulder against her laughter. Jonah, who had left her when their promises were still fragile and made himself a shadow that men feared. "Doc," the sheriff said, his voice low. "He don't have long if you won't take him. He's—" The sheriff's jaw tightened. He couldn't finish. Eliza saw Jonah for what he was in that moment, a man unraveled and very near the end. He had a cold, stunned look, a kind of apology lodged under his dirt-dark beard. The blood on his shirt was a map of mistakes and gunpowder. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the old ache that remembering him always brought. "You brought him here?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The sheriff's stance said it all, reluctant, dutiful, but relieved. Muldoon found him by the creek, shot up the west flank, might not make sunrise. A murmur spread through the deputies. The townsfolk would want him left to rot. Jonah had stolen, robbed, and, worst of all, rumor had it he'd betrayed the Marlowe family years ago, long before Eliza had closed the book on that wound. For many, the ledger was settled. But for Eliza, the old ledger was a living thing that refused to be filed away. She set a lamp on the table, pulled open the cabinet, and had her nurse, Mrs. Hargreave, fetch fresh bandages. Jonah's eyes opened when Eliza knelt beside him. They were the same ocean slate blue she'd known since a half-hopeful dawn. For a breath, they held a childlike surprise that she was the one he'd found. "Eliza," he said, and the name that used to make her heart tilt toward the sun now landed like a pebble in the basin of her life. "You took your time," she said, her words sharp, though her hands were steadier than she felt. "Where'd you get shot?" "Bank," he managed. "Got split open. Rode hard to lose them. Didn't make it." He coughed, a sound like a shudder in the wind, staining the porch boards with more blood. Eliza cleaned his wound by lamplight, the old motions returning. Press, wash, bind, as if muscle memory could outrun history. She saw the scar along his jaw from some old brawl, the hollows beneath his eyes. She saw the same hands that once held hers when they planned to escape a town that offered them neither bread nor mercy. "You left," she said, softer now. The room smelled of iodine and cedar. Jonah's mouth twitched. "I had to go," he said, his voice breaking. "You know why? They took more than a man can stand. I thought—" He reached for her wrist, finding just enough strength to touch her. "I thought I could fix it. Fix it." The phrase had once been a promise. Now it was just another mark in a ledger with no ink left to sign. Footsteps hurried outside. "Doc, there's more. Another man in the alley." The sheriff's gaze flicked to the boardwalk and tightened. He had come to her because there was no one else. She worked through the night, murmuring reassurances into Jonah's ear as deputies argued outside about a posse and a rope. By morning, she had him bandaged well enough to keep him alive. Word spread like wildfire, setting the town humming. Some wanted to drag Jonah out and let the desert be his judge. But Eliza felt a fiercer thing. Her oath was not something to be abandoned when the choice grew messy. "You're not taking him anyplace," she told the sheriff. "If he needs help, he gets it. If he needs handing over to the law, I'll do that when he's fit." She didn't say that the man in her clinic carried her name on his tongue like contrition. She didn't say that beneath all the betrayal, something else still had a hold on her. Jonah opened his eyes at noon and saw them. A posse gathered outside, spurs glinting, fingers itching near holsters. "They'll hang me," he whispered. "They're likely to try," she said. "Best you sleep." But just then, a shadow moved in the doorway. "There's someone here to see you, Miss Marlowe," the sheriff said, his hand hovering near his gun. The figure wasn't a reporter or a friend. It was a woman Eliza hadn't seen in years, thin and wrapped in a travel-worn shawl, and in her arms was a small bundle that snuffled and blinked with bright, accusing eyes. "Eliza," the woman said, her voice a tiny whisper. "It's my boy. He's Jonah's." The room shrank. Jonah started awake, his face a mirror of the family he had abandoned. His fingers clawed at the sheets. Eliza's throat closed. Mercy had just become far more tangled than she could have imagined. Outside, the posse was getting restless. Inside, a child's small hand peeked from the blanket. She had to choose. She lifted a lamp. In that thin cone of light, Jonah looked like both the boy she promised to run away with and the man who had made a ruin of those promises. "Keep him quiet," she told the woman with Jonah's child, "and lock the door." Her voice did not shake. She turned back to her patient. "He needs a surgeon's hand." A loud rap at the door. "Miss Marlowe, open. It's the judge." Eliza unlatched the door. The judge stood between the posse and her clinic, his face unreadable. At his feet lay another man, pale with fear, the one who'd led the robbery. "You have a choice, doctor," the judge said quietly. "Heal him, and you take on the law's shadow. Refuse, and this town will remember." Eliza felt the old oath settle in her chest like a stone. She had promised to tend the living. She stepped back inside, closed the door, and set her hands once more on the outlaw who had broken her heart. The needle descended. The lamp threw their shadows long upon the wall, and just as she began to sew, Jonah whispered another secret. "There's something in the bank safe. For you. It wasn't all taken. I hid it." Eliza froze, thread in hand. He smiled, a small thing that didn't belong on a dying man's face. "Under the chapel floor." His breath hitched. Outside, the judge tapped his boot, patient as a tombstone. Inside, Eliza felt the ground shift. The wound that brought Jonah here was both body and story. The bandage would hold for now, but the choice to save him, to listen to his last confession, would carry consequences like a shadow. She tied a knot and whispered, "Then you'd better tell me everything." The sun bled across the horizon, a slow, painful dawn over Dry Hollow. I watched from my window as the posse circled like uncertain wolves, caught between attack and retreat. The judge was back in the town square. Sheriff Hale stood his ground on my porch, jaw set like stone. Inside, Jonah Pike was breathing. Each breath a struggle, a question of whether waking was a gift or a curse. His blood had soaked into the floorboards, my sleeves, my very soul. He was an outlaw, and even in sleep his body twitched with unspoken confessions. I dipped a cloth in cool water, wiping his fevered brow. The simple act of healing was a comfort, a routine I could cling to. Healing a man's body? Simple. But healing the wound he'd carved into my heart, that was a different matter entirely. The door latch clicked. Sheriff Hale stepped inside, his hat held in his hand like a heavy burden. "Doc," he murmured, his voice low, "Judge wants word. Says since you patched Pike up, he's officially in custody. We're moving him at sundown." I kept my eyes on Jonah. "He'll die if you move him, Hale. And you know it." The sheriff let out a long sigh. "The town wants blood, Eliza. They've waited a long time for what they call justice." My voice was sharp, as sharp as my scalpel. Justice isn't dragging a dying man through the dust. And mercy doesn't come easy, he shot back, his tone softening. But the law's the law. A rustle from the cot. Jonah's eyes fluttered open, hazy and lost. My breath hitched. It was a foolish, reflexive betrayal I couldn't control. Hale cleared his throat, fixing Jonah with a long, hard stare. "Pike, you've got till sundown, then we move." Jonah's voice was a dry rasp, a ghost of its former self. "That's generous, Sheriff. More time than most gave me." Hale turned and left without another word, the closing door sealing us in silence. I pulled a stool closer to the cot, forcing a calm I didn't feel into my posture. "You shouldn't speak." He managed a weak, stubborn chuckle. "Never listened before. Why start now?" I dabbed his brow again, my heart a tight knot in my chest. "You mentioned the chapel floor." He turned his head, his gaze finding mine, surprisingly steady. "I thought I'd lost everything. I thought, if I ever came back, I'd lay it all at your feet, give you the life you deserved." My pulse stuttered. "You thought hiding stolen money in God's house was your path to redemption?" His jaw tightened, not with defiance, but with shame. "It wasn't stolen," he whispered. "It was about Marlowe Ranch, your father's land. There was a deed, a payment owed to him before he died. They cheated him. They cheated you. I took the proof. I took the funds that were rightfully yours. I hid them, planning to bring them back to you." I stared at him, my breath shallow. "And you expect me to believe that?" His voice trembled. "I expect nothing. I never meant for you to suffer because of what I did." The room fell silent, the only sounds the murmurs and shuffling feet from the town waking outside, hungry for a verdict. Then, a soft coo came from the crib near the door. Jonah stiffened, a forgotten tenderness flickering across his face. "His name?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Samuel." Jonah closed his eyes. "I never held him." Clara, the child's mother, emerged from the back room. Her shoulders were fragile, but her eyes held a fire that only survival can grant. "You weren't here to," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and grief. Jonah looked at her, stripped bare by fever and regret. "I am sorry, Clara." "You being sorry doesn't raise a child," she replied, her voice cracking. I had to move. I went to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass. A crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and righteous anger. The West had many gods, but mercy rarely sat at the head of the table. Behind me, Jonah whispered, "Eliza, if I don't make it, take the deed. It's your land. Your father's name deserves to breathe again." "And if you do make it?" I asked, my back still to him. He took a shaky breath. "Then I stand trial. Maybe pay the price. Maybe—" He trailed off. "Maybe see him once." Clara clutched Samuel tighter, the baby's tiny fingers curling around the lace on her dress. I turned, my shoulders squared, my voice level. "You are not dying yet. I won't let you." A faint smile touched Jonah's lips. "You always were the stubborn one." Heavy footsteps stomped onto the porch. The judge's voice boomed through the wooden door. "Doctor, we ride for the chapel by noon. Proof or no proof?" Fear flickered inside me, but a cold resolve settled over it like iron cooling in water. I opened the door just a crack. "Judge, if you move him today, his blood is on your hands." The judge's eyes narrowed. "This town is tired of being haunted by him." "He's not the only ghost here," I said, my voice calm, deadly certain. "Some of us are still paying for sins that weren't ours." A hush fell over the crowd. Clara rushed to my side, the child on her hip. "If you go, I go too." Jonah tried to rise from the cot, wincing in pain. "Eliza, don't. Not for me." I walked back to him, leaning in close, my whisper meant only for him. "This isn't for you," I said. "It's for the truth. For everything I had lost. For the life I had built from the ashes. And for the slim chance that redemption was still possible in this hard land." I grabbed my medical satchel, tied my coat, and looked at the sheriff. "We go to the chapel," I declared, "under guard, with the child, with the man." Hale's voice was quiet. "And if the town refuses?" I glanced at Jonah, saw the fragile hope in his eyes. "Then they'll have to get through me." The wind kicked up outside, whispering through the cottonwoods like old souls warning of a coming storm. As I stepped onto the porch, a doctor, a betrayed woman, the guardian of an outlaw's last chance, the whole town watched. Judgment waited at the chapel. But so did the truth. And maybe, just maybe, forgiveness. But forgiveness, like the law, never came cheap in the West. From inside, a weak voice called my name, more a plea than a sound. "Eliza," Jonah rasped. "If I don't make it, bury me near your father." I paused at the threshold, my spine straight, my eyes like steel. "You're not dying today," I answered, and I closed the door, leaving Jonah with his ghosts, while outside, destiny gathered like thunder rolling toward the hills. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of the Old West. If this story captured your imagination, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of dust, grit, and redemption. Let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Until next time, stay strong. The chapel stood at the very edge of Dry Hollow, a lonely sentinel where the prairie grass bowed to the wind, almost like a congregation lost in silent prayer. Its white paint, once as bright and hopeful as a Sunday morning, now flaked away in tired, curling strips. The cross perched above the doors leaned just a bit, not broken, but weary, as if it had absorbed one too many confessions and still carried the weight of every single one. Up ahead, Eliza Marlowe walked with a determined stride, her coat pulled tight against more than just the wind. Her boots were steady, a stark contrast to the storm of memories raging inside her. Close behind, Clara clutched baby Samuel, holding him so tightly you'd think the world itself was trying to snatch him away. And then there was Sheriff Hale, practically carrying Jonah Pike, the outlaw, the betrayer, the man seeking a redemption he probably didn't deserve. Jonah's breath was shallow, each step seeming to cost him a piece of his fading strength. Trailing them all were the townsfolk, their hands rough around their rifles, their whispers like restless ghosts on the breeze. Some were there for justice, some for mercy. But most just came to witness what this day would carve into the town's long, hard history. Inside the chapel, the light was fractured by stained glass, scattering red and gold shards across the dusty pews. The air was thick with silence, dust motes floating like tired angels in the sunbeams. It felt like time itself had paused, holding its breath in this sacred hush. Jonah sank into a pew near the front, his body giving way. Eliza immediately knelt beside him, her fingers gently checking the stitches she had sewn into his side just hours before. His pulse was a weak flutter beneath her touch, like a bird too exhausted to even dream of flying. "You should be in bed," she whispered, her voice a mix of anger and concern. "Couldn't let you do this alone," Jonah murmured back, his own voice sounding like worn leather and a lifetime of regret. Eliza didn't reply, but her jaw tightened. Love, anger, destiny, they were all twisted into a knot in her chest, a knot she couldn't begin to untangle. This man had once destroyed everything she held dear, and yet here he was, bleeding for her peace, for her truth, for a redemption he was fighting for with his last breath. At the altar, the judge stood, his face carved from stone. "Dr. Marlowe," he called out, his voice echoing in the holy quiet, "you claim there is evidence linking this outlaw case to fraud against your family. Present it." Eliza rose slowly. Jonah had told her where it was hidden, right under the chapel floor. How strange, she thought, that the proof of a terrible sin lay just beneath the feet of saints. She knelt at the altar, pressing her ear to the wooden planks, searching. "Here," she whispered, tapping on a spot that sounded hollow. Sheriff Hale handed her a pry bar. She had just managed to wedge its tip under the plank when a new sound rolled in from outside. A sound that wasn't thunder. It was hoofbeats, fast and many. Suddenly, the chapel doors burst wide open. Dust and chaos swirled into the sacred space. A lean figure stepped into the aisle, carrying the swagger of a man who feared no god and respected no devil. It was Fox Dalton, the leader of the gang Jonah once rode with, the final, damning thread connecting Jonah to his outlaw past. "Well," Fox drawled, his boots echoing on the worn boards, a cruel smile playing on his lips, "ain't this a holy sight? The whole town gathered to save a man who earned a rope 10 times over." Instantly, guns were raised all across the room. Sheriff Hale's revolver cocked with a deadly click, followed by the sound of a dozen rifles being readied. But Fox just smiled, unfazed. "I'm here for Jonah Pike," he announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "He dies with us." Pain shot through Jonah's body as he forced himself up from the pew. "Fox, leave," he rasped. Fox just chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "You left us first." Then his gaze, sharp as broken glass, shifted to Eliza. "Tell her, Jonah. Go on. Tell her why her daddy never came home." Eliza froze. The world seemed to stop. She had never known who was behind her father's death, only that the bitterness of it had settled deep into her bones. Jonah's voice shook, heavy with the weight of his confession. "I told them to scare him, not kill him. I tried to warn him, but I hesitated. And my weakness, it cost him his life." The chapel grew colder. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The truth she had spent her whole life searching for had finally found her, and it stabbed deeper and more cruelly than any bullet ever could. He had been a part of it, a part of the storm that had shattered her entire world. Fox lifted his rifle, aiming it squarely at Jonah. Then, with a flicker of malice, he shifted his aim toward Eliza. "He didn't tell you that part, did he, Angel?" Bang. The shot split the air. The judge dove for cover. Hale tackled Fox. Screams erupted as more gunfire roared like thunder trapped inside the stone walls. Clara huddled over the baby, shielding him with her own body. Amid the chaos, Jonah staggered to his feet, the stitches in his side tearing, fresh blood soaking his shirt. He saw the sheriff's fallen pistol and grabbed it. He saw Fox's rifle leveling again, its barrel pointed straight at Eliza. And in that moment, Jonah didn't hesitate. He stepped directly in front of her. Bang! Jonah fell. Hard. The breath left his body in a single, final rush. Blood spilled onto the chapel floor as if time itself had been cut open. Fox was finally wrestled down, shackled and defeated, but the real battle was already over, and Jonah Pike lay dying. Eliza cradled him, tears carving silent, hot lines down her face. "You foolish, stubborn man," she choked out. His hand, trembling and warm, found hers. "Always meant to set things right," he breathed, his words faint. "Redemption, bullet, and a prayer." "You stay," she whispered fiercely, desperately. "You don't get to leave again." His eyes drifted to Clara and the child. "Tell him. I tried. Tell him. His father wasn't all bad." Tears fell from her cheeks onto his. "You tell him yourself." A soft smile touched Jonah's lips, the kind of smile a soul gives when it knows its burden is finally lightening. "Lay me near your father," he whispered. "Let me rest, near the man I wronged." And then, as quietly as the wind leaving the prairie grass at dusk, Jonah Pike was gone. Eliza lowered her forehead to his, a final, intimate gesture. "May God forgive you. I already have." Later, the judge pried the floorboard open. Inside, just as Jonah had said, were the deeds, the forged papers, the proof of everything that had been stolen from the Marlowe family. The truth, finally unearthed from its shallow grave. "Bury him on the hill," Eliza said softly, her voice steady now. "Not as an outlaw or a saint. As a man who paid what he owed." Clara touched her arm gently. "You saved us." Eliza nodded, looking at the baby. "Raise him good." "We will," Clara whispered back. "He'll grow up knowing who gave his name back." Eliza stepped out of the chapel into the fading light. The prairie wind moved through the grass like a quiet, somber hymn. And then the chapel bell, crooked, tired, but unbroken, rang once, its single note carrying across the wide, open horizon. A farewell, a prayer, a soul redeemed, not by the life it lived, but by how it chose to leave. In Dry Hollow, the name Jonah Pike would no longer be spoken with hate or even with praise. It would be spoken with a quiet reverence for a man who, at the very end, finally chose the right road, even if it was the one that killed him. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you were moved by this tale of redemption, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more. It really helps the channel, and I'd love to see you back here again soon.